I'm gonna say it, and you're gonna like mouth the words.
Okay, let's do it.
Right? Hi guys, we're Becky and Chris, and today we're gonna be showing you how to do primary and secondary color correction in Premiere Pro.
Color grading is the process of adjusting and stylizing a clip to achieve a certain mood or look. Now, before we can start color grading, we need to get the clip to a neutral starting point, something called primary color correction. And all the tools you need for primary color correction can pretty much be found in the basic corrections panel. So looking at this clip, it's a bit too warm, and I'm actually just gonna start by using the automatic white balance selector. I'm gonna find a white spot in this image, and this water looks pretty white. And that gives us a pretty good starting point. And then what we can do is we can fine tune it a little bit. I'm just gonna cool it down a little bit by dragging the temperature slider. So you actually drag it all the way over and you can see it turns very blue. Go the other way, it turns very amber. And I think that probably a good neutral spot is right around here. I'm just eyeballing this myself, but I still think there's a little bit of a green cast. So I'm gonna add some magenta. So that's probably a good starting point there. It looks pretty neutral. So this clip's a little bit underexposed. It's just a bit too dark. So I'm gonna increase the exposure here. And that looks good there. So we can probably add a little bit of contrast as well. And when I say contrast, I mean how black the blacks are and how white the whites are. So we can crank it all the way up and it gets very contrasty. We could go all the way down and it gets very low contrast. And we'll say somewhere around, probably around there looks good. Now I'm not gonna get into the highlight shadows, whites and black sliders, but they're basically tools that you can use to more finely tune the bright and dark parts of your image. Okay, if we go up to the effect controls panel, we can actually turn the Lumetri color effect off and on. And you can see just our primary color correction has brought us right to a very neutral spot here. So we're good to start the color grade now. So before we do that, color grading is highly subjective. What you think looks good might not be what I think looks good and vice versa. But I'm gonna show you what I do just as a way to illustrate how these tools work. I prefer a more desaturated look. So I'm going to go to the vibrance slider here under the creative tab. And I'm just gonna bring that down just a touch. You can see the intensity of the colors just gets dialed back a little bit. Okay, so now that we have that set, I'm gonna go down to the curves box. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise the black point up a little bit, just a touch, and I'm going to lower the white point slightly. And again, this is all personal preference. I'm gonna add some mid-tone contrast back by making sort of a gentle S curve in the lower mid-tones / shadows. And if this tool confuses you a little bit, you should check out a video on our channel, Becky and Chris on YouTube. We go into a full deep dive on how it works, but that's a little bit outside the scope of this video. I'm gonna go down to the color wheel, and you can see you get a separate color wheel for the shadows, midtones, and highlights of your image. You also have these sliders on the side, which can adjust the brightness or exposure. So for example, I think the shadows, I went a little bit overboard with lightening them with the curves dialog, so I can actually darken them with this slider here. And that probably looks good right about there. And I'm only doing this just to illustrate that there's multiple ways to make a similar adjustment using a different tool. So I'm gonna move to the shadows color wheel here, and you can see that by dragging the color wheel in each different direction, I can change the tint of the shadows. So I'm gonna add a little bit of a turquoisey blue. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add some contrast between the midtones and shadow colors by going the opposite direction towards the sort of orangey amber side of the spectrum. Okay, that looks pretty good. So that's before, that's after we sort of added a moody, bluish steel color to the shadows. So the final tool I wanna show you guys is the HSL secondary tab. Let's say in this image I want to change the color of these trees, but leave everything else as is. I can use the eyedropper here and click on a green part of the image. And now if I drag this color wheel, I should only be changing the color of the trees. All right, so we'll turn off that for now. So you may have noticed we've been making all of these adjustments directly on an effect on this clip, which is fine for primary color correction, but when I start grading, what I actually do is I go to New Item, Adjustment Layer, hit OK, drag it into my timeline here. So by making the adjustment on the adjustment layer, I can make one adjustment and it'll affect all the clips underneath.
Love the color.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. In the next video, I'm gonna show you guys how to work with the Essential Sound panel to bring your audio to the next level.